Okay, so kind of the first question here, just overall, you've done a lot of different characters. Like your IMDb, your wiki page is pretty much stuffed with different characters over different mediums. What does it take to kind of just bring life, in voice acting? I feel a lot of it's like bringing life to a character. What does it take for different types of roles? And you can talk about really any role you've had in the past.
Yeah, you know, I think it's bringing a lot of yourself. I think early on when I started acting, I had this manager in LA who was kind of he was like, you have to live in your car and give everything to this, and I like stopped doing martial arts, which was something I had done my whole life, and I had stopped hanging out with certain friends and things like that, and it was horrible advice from him. I don't think you have to do that at all. I honestly think that one of the most important tools for an actor is just living your life and doing the things that you're passionate about and having friends and building relationships and stuff like that, because all of that experience is what helps you have things to draw from when you're building out characters. So whether it's a random villain on My Hero Academia or whether it's Yuji and Jujutsu Kaisen, all of that stuff, I'm bringing a little bit of myself and finding ways for me to bridge the gap between who they are and who I am and where we relate to bring life to those characters. So, yeah, man, I mean, I truly think I just live my life.
Yeah, that's great. That's the most natural way of doing it, I feel like.
Yeah.
So in terms of different mediums, like when it comes to video games, anime, other just like more Western animation, how does it work in terms like pulling behind the curtain a little bit? How does it work in terms of like the process? And maybe even I had a question more specifically when it comes to, like ad-libbing, right? Because I thought with especially like the anime, there's a Japanese version of the voice, and then there's an English dub that you then fill in for us that don't maybe prefer the English dub or don't want to read the subtitles. How does that really work, like in the booth?
So all of these various kind of like niche video games, anime, which is dubbing, or prelay, what they call Western animation, where you have a script, you record the audio, and then it's animated after that. The production process is always different, and then within those, it can be different project to project. But typically, how it works is for anime, as you know and as you mentioned, the animation is already finished. So we get that sent, we get that in the booth and we're watching finished animation and we have our start point and our end point. And basically we're filling in the gaps. So to your question about ad libs, that makes that a little bit difficult. Now, I think the further along you get and the more comfortable you get with the character, you can find places for that. But ultimately, that performance is tied to however they animate it. So sometimes that works out awesome, and then sometimes it makes for some clunky translation and how it ends up looking. There's a couple of scenes where, or just for example, like maybe not even a specific scene, but if the character's mouth opens, if the line is what the heck are you doing, or something like that. So my mouth is what the heck are you doing, but the Japanese might only have two flaps. So then you got to rewrite the line to make it fit into the thing. So that is a complicated process. And I always say dubbing is like it's like rubbing your stomach and patting your head while you're acting inside of a box. It's kind of a very tricky thing. Um, Now there was a show I did called Star versus the Forces of Evil, which was a Disney series, and all their stuff is prelay. And in that one, I was able to ad lib and improv and all this stuff as much as possible, which was really fun.
Yeah,
Um, I would say still it's always good form as an actor to read the lines as the writer wrote them the first one or two times,
right.
just out of respect for the person doing their job. Um, because yeah, you don't have a character without their words, so I feel like you gotta do it how they intend. And then if you see a moment or something like that, you can ad lib and all that stuff. And then video games is crazy. Video games usually give you zero context. You don't even know sometimes what game you're working on until it comes out, which may be 2 or 3 years later. So, video games, you go in and you're relying heavily on the director for context of what's happening, which is all code named and code worded anyway. They're just giving you scenarios and then context for how to read your lines.
Doesn't say
And
Call of
then
Duty 6 on it. Yeah.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't, which would be so cool because I'd be geeking out about that. No, yeah, a lot of stuff is like you don't even realize. I was in Far Cry 5 and I didn't know I was in Far Cry 5 until like 2 years after I recorded it or something like that. Um, and then so you have very little context. So you're just doing what the director tells you. There's almost sometimes they might say give us, something else, but for the most part you're just doing what they say. And then another little niche in video game VO is if it's a Japanese game, a lot of time, or a foreign game, I guess it could be a Chinese game too. A lot of times they'll have you just match timing. So they'll play the Japanese, and I can do whatever I want as long as it's the exact same length. So they're comparing waveforms on the screen to make sure that whatever it is will fit where it fits in the game. So yeah, every day's different, which makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, some of those processes sound wild, especially like the anime. And that kind of leads into my next question was I was going to ask you, what would be your most difficult voice acting role you've had in your career so far, if you had to pick
Um,
one?
yeah, I honestly probably Yuji.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably Yuji, and part of that is because in season 2 it sort of required a lot of me as an actor, and there's some really heavy moments, and I wanted to make those feel as real as possible. So it just takes you to places as an actor that you normally don't typically get to go to in voiceover, like when you're working in cartoons and stuff like that. So that was really cool, actually, sort of a dream,
Yeah.
dream scenario because I'm getting to do so much with him. Um, and then also just like from a technical standpoint, we started recording Jujutsu Kaisen in October of 2020. So we were all recording from our own home studios, which meant not only were we actors with a new studio on a big project that had, sort of, I mean, at that time, I don't know if we knew how big it was going to be, but certainly maybe the studios had high expectations.
Yeah.
Um, but because of when we were recording it, we were doing our own engineering. We were in the booth, adjusting levels while we're trying to act, while we're, all at the same time. So that also made it a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like JJK, Jujutsu Kaisen is just this massive series, in terms of popularity. It's crazy. So I was kind of wondering, like, when I first hopped on, I mentioned that, like it's so cool, you're Yuji. How has it changed your career?
I mean, to be honest with you, I try not to pay attention to that. I really do try not to pay attention to that. Um, Now the things that are kind of undeniable is the fact that like a big portion of what I'm doing now is traveling around not only the US but globally for conventions and appearances and things like that.
Yeah.
Me and my castmates, we're getting to do a lot of that stuff, and so we're doing meet and greets with fans. It's brought a lot of opportunities to do charitable work, which has been really fantastic. You know, Companies like Make a Wish and stuff like that, which is really cool.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, it's added almost like a whole other little area of work, with these conventions and things like that. That's been really cool.
Yeah. The fan
And as far as
popularity.
yeah, totally. And as far as VO goes, again, I don't know. I try not to. I feel like if I think too hard about it, I'll be like, well, I don't ever want to become, what's the word? I guess entitled or feel like I am owed something because I'm on a show that's popular. You know what I mean? I'll just do as good of work as possible, and hopefully that speaks for itself. And wherever it leads me, it leads me. And you know, yeah,
Speaking of where it's leading you, season 3, we're all very excited. I was kind
yes,
of wondering, you may not know exactly when it's coming out, but if you have an update on that, that would be great. Your work on it, but then also maybe just tease a little bit of like where Yuji goes, because like you mentioned, season 2 really intense. A lot had to get pulled out of you and all the actors, I would say, in terms of just like the intensity and the emotions of season
yeah,
2, and just maybe you could talk a little bit about season 3.
yeah. Season 3. So I said before season 2 came out that it had the potential to be one of the greatest second seasons of anime that we've seen. Um, and
Might have been right on
without
that.
like,
Yeah,
huh? Yeah, I
you might
just
have been
feel
right.
like, yeah, I feel like it really lived up to the hype. Kicking off with the flashback arc, the hidden inventory arc with Gojo and Geto, and kind of seeing where they came from, and then the whole Shibuya incident. I swear, when I was watching it back, maybe like 8 or 9 episodes before the season ended, I was like, this is the greatest episode of JJK. And then the next episode to come out, and this is the greatest episode of JJK, and it just kept happening until the end. So I really hyped up Shibuya. I feel like it lived up to it. I think this is a bold statement. I think season three could top the hype that we saw in Shibuya. There are so many good things coming, and keeping it as spoiler free as possible. There's so much more trauma. It doesn't get any easier. I think season two really shifted the tone in JJK, and it's going to continue down that path. But season three, the Culling Games arc, we see the introduction of a host of new characters, all of which continue what we have established in JJK, which is that every character has something amazing to offer, and there's really not a bad character in the series. Um, so yeah, I'm very, very hyped for season three. It's gonna be tough for Yuji still, but it's just kind of the nature of the show, and um, yeah, there's some really big fights coming up
You think it'll
that
be
I'm
out
hyped
this year?
about. Um, so we haven't heard anything officially. A lot of what we're sort of hearing whispers about is fall of this year.
Mm.
But the studio, Mappa, does so much stuff and they're kind of crushing it on all fronts. They've got the Chainsaw Man movie coming, a bunch of new series and things like that. So I don't know. I'm as much as a fan I am of the show. And if I wasn't in it, I would be, an even bigger fan probably. But I I'm fine if it takes them a bit, as long as we get it how it should be done, which they've been crushing it so far. So
Yeah.
however long they need, just take their time.
Yeah, shifting gears a little bit to a newer anime, at least for me, and just recently had its first season, Kaiju number 8. I was just wondering, like, what excites you most about that new role and just that series overall?
Dude, that no one dies. I am not gonna be traumatized by that series. Um,
That's awesome.
uh,
No,
yeah, sorry, that's a spoiler, not non-spoiler spoiler.
it's good.
No, I will say I got Kaiju number 8 on the heels of season two of JJK ending. And when season two of JJK ended, I was like, man, I feel like I need a little break from Yuji. This was just so heavy. And I didn't know what was coming next. And then I got the call for Kaiju, and I had heard about it and, you know, had talked to a couple of friends who were really deep into the manga. I'm like, tell me about it. And they're like, oh, it's so cool. So I was fully expecting it to be as cool as it is. But what I didn't expect and what caught me way off guard was how funny it is. It is so funny. The humor brings such a nice levity to it. While it still remains really cool and there's some really badass moments in there. Um, but I just think that it's so funny. It's really charming. The dynamic of my character, Reno Ichikawa, and Kafka, the main guy, I
Yeah.
think is really fun. It's sort of this odd couple kind of relationship. And yeah, I'm so excited about the humor of it. The show feels to me like early days My Hero Academia,
Mm.
kind of with like the rise in popularity and how many people are talking about it, and
Yeah.
how many people I talk to about it at conventions and things like that. It's really cool. So yeah, there's a lot to be hyped about for Kaiju. I also think it's really cool what Crunchyroll is doing, where they're releasing the English and the Japanese at the exact same time.
Hmm.
And I think that is proving to them that there is a market for having both released at the same time, and it doesn't detract from one or the other because people are ultimately going to watch whatever they watch. But what it does is elevate the show as a whole
Yeah.
and brings everyone together, which is cool.
Yeah, I think options are great personally. I like to kind of mix it up, like sometimes if I'm more distracted, I'm like, I need to hear this in English. Like
Yeah,
I know I can't like fully focus, or if I can't my fully focus, maybe I listen to it in Japanese and read the subtitles. What a couple more questions for you. You mentioned Reno, your character in number 8. I was wondering like how that performance is different than Yuji specifically. I mean, you can compare the two. Obviously, I feel like different tones of both series and maybe like how that plays into, and like you mentioned too, like your role in each series as well, maybe how that kind of plays into your performance.
yeah. All great questions, and definitely all something to um, take into account. when choosing sort of like the character voice and all that. The thing for Reno is he's not the main character, so he doesn't have that. It's not that he doesn't have main character energy because he does have moments of like where he, in another world maybe. But to me, my job with him is to make sure, and it's sort of his role as a character too in the show, is to make sure that Kafka is shining. Like he is there in support of Kafka, and I am there, you know, to kind of make that uh, also very apparent. So, a lot of times in the scenes with those two, where in JJK, Yuji might be the one who's heightened, and everyone else around him is like, "What are you doing? You're an idiot." Ichikawa in Kaiju number 8, he's the one who is a little bit more of the straight man, and Kafka is the one who's, a little bit crazier. Um, so yeah, all of that kind of takes into account. I mean, for both characters, I'm pretty much using my regular voice. It's just where they live is a little bit different. Ichikawa is a little more understated. I think as a character, he's finding himself, even though he comes in pretty strong, knowing like he doesn't want to quit, he'd never give up, and all that stuff. I think he realizes once he starts becoming friends with Kafka that, he also is finding himself. I'm excited to learn more about him and where he comes from and why he is the way he is too. So, um, yeah, it's fun taking all this stuff into account. I'm a big proponent of reading the manga before I go into the booth for these
Hmm,
bigger shows, especially when I'm one of the main cast. I think it's super important to have an idea of where your character is headed and um,
that's really
how you
interesting.
can, yeah, how you can sprinkle in things early on. Because again, with dub, we're already limited to what we can do. I can't add too much extra. But if I know that, like, oh, this scene is happening because down the road we see a payoff of it, um, if I can add anything in there early, I think it just elevates sort of what we're doing in dub. And it's not just randomly reading one-off lines here and there and hoping that the pieces of the puzzle fit together. I don't think that usually works very well. So,
Right. You mentioned kind of
yeah.
where we're going. I know season two was announced to hopefully be released sometime in July of this year.
Hmm.
Like, can you tease at
Yeah.
all, maybe what's coming next? What fans and readers and listeners can expect?
Yeah, more epic kaiju butt kicking. Everyone, we sort of saw at the end of season 1 that everyone's going to need to level up. We've got Kaiju number 9 was introduced, and there's sort of like the mystery behind now we know that there's someone else kind of like Kafka or something like that. Um, so we're gonna see more power-ups. Hopefully, we're gonna hear more epic music. The music choice in season 1, all the music choices were just amazing. Um, and as I've continued to read the manga, Ichikawa, even though obviously I'm biased now, but if I wasn't in the show, Ichikawa would be my favorite. So my boy keeps leveling up, and it's very exciting.
One last question for you, just kind of a
Hmm.
fun one. It can't be something you've worked on or are working on right now, but what would be your favorite current anime running, if you have one, and maybe your favorite all time?
Ooh, okay. Favorite current anime running would have to be. Okay, technically we've been on a little bit of a break, but it's coming back, so I can say that it's currently running. I'm very, very excited for One Punch
One
Man
Punch,
season
yeah.
3. Yeah, the humor in that show is top notch, and yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I have not read that manga, so I don't know what's coming. So I'm just excited to kind of go along for the ride.
I think it's been
And then
2019 since season two. Yeah.
I know, yeah. And then favorite of all time, it would be hard to choose one, but probably Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Okay.
That's like that's like a kind of a classic. Maybe My Hero. I'm very excited for the end of My Hero. The manga was amazing. My sort of like one that not a lot of people mention that is one of my top, probably my top 3 or 4 is Noragami. That's another one of my big time
Cool.
favorites. Yeah.